Welcome back to my channel, guys. My name is Raggy, and today I am bringing you a tier list in which I am going to be rating all of the types in Pokemon. So these are all of the types as of Gen 6, that is X and Y, as far as I know. There have been no more introduced since that time. So I'm going to be making these ratings today based from S through to D, based on any old reason. Do I use them competitively? Do I think they are aesthetically interesting? Is there a particular Pokemon or two that are this type that I just love? So for any reason, my ratings for all of the types of Pokemon that there can be. So without further ado, in order of just how we see them, let's get into it. So right out of the gate here, we do have Bug type, and I am going to put Bug type in A. I actually have a bit of an affinity for Bug type. There's a number of Bug types that are like probably in my top 10, including Scyther and Heracross, and competitively, it's a pretty useful typing to have. I find Bug types have a way of sneaking up on you in a good way. I mean, it depends on what side of the battle you're on, but I like Bug types. I like specific Bug types. I like the typing. Could do without that fire weakness, but I guess it makes sense, so whatever. Then we have Dark type, and I'm going to put Dark type down in D. I know that a lot of people really, really like Dark type, but for me, the typical utility of a Dark type Pokemon is just not how I play. Typically in competitive battles, Dark type Pokemon are used for setting up or for doing kind of more roundabout play styles where you like buff stats or you use status effects on your opponent, stuff like that. Stuff that takes a bit more thought. So it's just a testament to how little thinking I'm willing to do in a competitive scene. But yeah, nothing wrong with Dark type, it's just that's where my priorities are. Fighting type, I have to put Fighting in S rank. Fighting type is easily my favorite type. My favorite Pokemon is Primate. Like, I've got like 6 favorite Fighting type Pokemon. So I just have a massive affinity for this type. I feel like it's wildly underused in the competitive scene, but that might just be my bias as well. But yeah, I love Fighting type Pokemon, 100%. Fire type, nothing wrong with it. Probably a bit overrated. I see a lot of Fire types getting a lot of use, but that could just be because there are so many good Fire type Pokemon. A little oversaturated, the Fire type market, I will say that. Fairy type Pokemon. I'm pretty sure everyone who started playing before X and Y is going to have some kind of opinion about Fairy type, and I'm going to rate it a B because I feel like as it stands in the meta today, Fairy type is a necessary evil. I don't think it should have been called Fairy type. I think because what a lot of people were talking about in the lead up to a new Pokemon type was Light type Pokemon to counteract Dark. And Fairy type kind of does counteract Dark. It is stronger than Dark type. It beats Dark type. So I get the rationale. I understand. Mostly I do just begrudge it. Just because of the theme, I guess. I have nothing against like a fairy aesthetic. I just think that it was a little contrived, and Game Freak has probably backed themselves into a corner with it now where a Pokemon's playstyle isn't enough to constitute being a fairy type. It needs to aesthetically resemble a fairy, which is design-wise, it's gonna back you into a corner. But I'm not an animator or designer, so it's not up to me. But that's where I put it. Flying type is also going to go into B just because it is a solid type. Flying type, when you think of a secondary type on a Pokemon, Flying type is the cover child, essentially, the cover boy for that concept. And what I'm talking about is when a Pokemon's second type is, well, different. Flying type is, I think there's only one Pokemon whose main type is Flying type. Otherwise, the closest you get are normal Flying type Pokemon. So it is, like, it adds a lot to battles. It gives you a lot to think about, especially with the relationship it has with things like Ground type or Electric type. So it is interesting like that. Dragon type, I'm gonna put Dragon type respectfully in B rank. It used to be completely broken, and now it's just another type. It's interesting to me that Game Freak still makes dragon type Pokemon as though they are supposed to be considered more powerful, but that is wholly thanks to their base stats or their ability, and pretty much has nothing to do with their typing. Game Freak now has to be pretty clever about what kind of typing they give with dragon type. Is it a dragon ground type? Is it a dragon flying type? All of these things matter more than the actual dragon typing itself, and especially ever since fairy type came out, because now dragon is completely useless against that as well. So dragon type, a bit underwhelming. Seems like it's super cool, and it is, but not as cool as you might hope. Electric type, I'm going to put it down in C, just because it's... I would put electric in the same vein as fire type. There are a lot of useful fire types, or there are a lot of useful electric type Pokemon, but I don't see myself leaning on them so much as I do the fire types. And I know it's like comparing apples and hybrid cars, but electric type Pokemon, they gotta work a bit harder to hold my attention. Ghost type Pokemon, also going straight up to S rank. I love ghost type Pokemon ever since the original Gen 1, even when it just started with Ghastly, Haunter, and Gengar. They were just really interesting to me, and I don't think it had so much to do with how exclusive they were. I think they are just visually interesting. It is a good idea for a ghost type to be a thing. And I've mentioned this in a previous video. It creates opportunities for cleverly designed Pokemon. So in the case of like Kofagrigus, who is a ghost type, and he could only be a ghost type because he is based on an ancient Egyptian sarcophagus, which is like, yeah, maybe you could angle that as a dark type. Maybe, like, or maybe even like a fire type, I don't know, but like ghost makes so much sense, and that's what's interesting about it to me. Then we have grass type. Grass type, I gotta give it a B. It's useful. There's a lot of really useful grass type Pokemon actually. Are any of my favorite Pokemon grass type? Not that I can think of off the top of my head, but there are a number of grass type Pokemon that I do like quite a lot. Like Torterra, or even Serperior. I really like Serperior. So, it's got its niche. I'll say that. Ground type, I'm going to put ground type in C, because it's useful, but more often than not in the competitive element, ground type is the cause of so much headache for me, whether it be because of spamming Earthquake, or I'll be using a ground type and I'm just not able to hit the flying type, or the Pokemon with levitate. Like, it says more about me as a trainer, and then it goes the other way where I'll stupidly try to use an electric type move on a ground type Pokemon. There's so much to remember about ground type, and it bugs me. I don't hate ground type, but I'm always a lot more wary of ground type Pokemon, especially the likes of Gliscor. Like, there's just so many ground type Pokemon that cause me a headache. It's insane. Ice type, I want to put Ice type higher, but the thing is, if you look at all of the Ice type Pokemon, very few of them are aesthetically pleasing. Most of them look like horrifying monsters, like Glalie or Abomasnow. You think of ice, and you think of like beautiful works of art, like sculpted from ice, or shining crystals of ice shards, or something like that. But I can only think of maybe one or two ice type Pokemon that are aesthetically pleasing like that, and they don't even look like ice or snow. They just look like I'm thinking in particular of Articuno and Glaceon. They are aesthetically brilliant. Like, they look so pretty and nice, but they're not even actually like made of ice or anything. They just kind of have the properties of ice powers inside them. It's ice type is such a letdown. We need more pretty looking ice type Pokemon. Like, if you agree. Then normal, and I have to put normal into B. And I think that makes perfect sense. Like, it has more weaknesses than it has strengths, but it's not by a lot. But most normal Pokemon in the competitive element do have much higher base stats or very good abilities. It is always interesting to work with normal type Pokemon. They have their niche for sure. My theory is you can spot an amateur trainer by how much they don't value normal type Pokemon. I'll say that. Poison type. Okay, poison type, similar to flying type, it's a really good secondary option. It's not to say that, like, unlike flying type, there are a lot of Pokemon that are just primarily poison type, but this one, it's one of the few that is more often than not seen as a secondary typing. And it's very useful. It adds a lot to think about in battle, and usually in my case, I can work with it pretty decently. Aesthetically, I don't care much for poison type Pokemon, but similarly to the normal type Pokemon, a lot of poison type Pokemon have very high base stats as well, so they are very useful. Same as I said about amateur trainers not valuing normal types, they probably don't value poison types as well, so there's that. Psychic type, I'm going to put Psychic type in A. Psychic types are fine. They are, like, as in Gen 1, they were broken, and then they got leveled out a little bit in Gen 2, and it's been pretty much smooth sailing ever since. There's still this stigma that Psychics are kind of overpowered, and I think that's because a lot of overpowered legendary Pokemon have Psychic typing, but it's neither here nor there. Most Psychic type Pokemon are built pretty well. There's a lot of very interesting ones. I love the rationale for why some Pokemon are Psychic types. So, yeah, I like Psychic. Rock type, I'm going to put Rock at the bottom. If only because, like, aesthetically, thematically, Rock type should be, like, one of the strongest, sturdiest types there are. But it has so many weaknesses. It's so exploitable. It's weak to water. It's weak to ground. Weak to grass. Weak to fighting. Weak to steel. There is so much that can just beat rock very easily. And you've got all of these really strong rock-type Pokemon who are kind of designed to be like defensive walls. And there's a very strong chance that they're going to be put up against something that just has one of these moves, or is this type with one of those moves, so it gets stab value, and it's kind of all for naught. It says a lot to me that a lot of rock-type Pokemon have the ability Sturdy, where it's like they are kind of artificially trying to enhance the idea that they are a sturdy Pokemon. Because, like, okay, your Graveler has Sturdy, but if it was really that defensively oriented, it shouldn't need that for an ability. So, and I'm not saying that rock types are innately bad. There are some really good rock type Pokemon. But in my experience, rock type is presented as like a impenetrable, unstoppable wall, and seldom is it actually ever that. So, that's how I feel about rock types. Next on this list is Steel, and I'm actually, despite just saying that it's superior to Rock, I'm going to rate it only down in C. Similar reason to Ground, actually. There are so many instances of fighting against Steel-type Pokemon that just gives me a headache. Usually, Steel types will be paired with another type that just makes them very hard to kill, and regardless of that, they usually have very high base stats in defense anyway. I don't like much dealing with defensively oriented Pokemon, and when I come against the likes of Bastiodon or Scizor or something like that, I know that like that's the thing. Scizor is actually meant to be offensively geared, but he's still really hard to get down if you're not prepared for him. So it's like, it just gives me a headache. I like Steel type, but I got that headache just thinking about dealing with them, so I have to rate them poorly for that reason. Then, lastly, we have Water type, and I'm going to put Water type respectfully in B, just because there are so many Water type Pokemon that I just love. None of them are overly interesting, or some are, but there's it's oversaturated. We're oversaturated with water. We are soaked at this point in the Pokemon series, and it's not to say that Water type is a bad type, but there's so many choices, and so many of them fall short of how good they could be. Some of them are actually very underwhelming. There's the likes of Gyarados, who is supposed to be similar to a rock type Pokemon, right? He's presented one way, but is actually really easy to kill. So, nothing wrong with Water type Pokemon. Nothing wrong with any of these types, really. But as it stands, this is where I rate them for any old reason. Leave in the comments which ones you agree with or which ones you disagree with and why. And if you enjoyed this video today, then please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell icon too, and then you don't have to miss out on future content when it becomes available. And yeah, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.